and welcome to another season of the UX Research Rundown. I'm Henrik Mattsson, the CEO of Lookback and your host for this show. And it's a brand new season number 3. For 2 seasons we've been talking about getting your team along on the journey that is research, and that's been fun. But now we're moving on to something else, and we're going to talk this season about AI, LLM, and UX research and all that stuff. And we have a great lineup of very interesting speakers. And the first one that I'm talking to today is Jess Holbrook, who is at Meta, and I'll let him introduce himself just in a moment here. Yeah, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It's fun to be able to maybe, kick off the 3rd season. Congrats on that.
Well, it's awesome. So, we always do this thing per ancient tradition in these 3 seasons that we have now. We ask our guests to talk a little bit about, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about how you got into the field. Because, we always get a lot of good feedback from the listeners who are often getting into the field or just starting out. And it's great to hear all of these different stories about how people get in and the backgrounds and stuff like that. So we can start with that, and then we'll get on to the topic at hand.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, so my current role is I'm a principal researcher and the acting director of the generative AI team, UX research team at Meta. And before that, I led the responsible AI UX research team here at Meta. Before that, I had a very similar role at Google, and I started a group called People Plus AI Research, or PAIR, there with 2 of my co-founders. And before that, I was at Amazon and Microsoft. My story about how I got into the field is fairly happenstance, actually. So I was in grad school at the University of Oregon in Eugene, Oregon, and I kind of needed a summer job to pay my rent that summer. And so I think I joined the only startup in Eugene, Oregon at that time. And as part of being a startup and being an intern, you just come in and find out what you're going to do each day. And one day, the people I was working for were basically like, hey, could you design the page that we sell our ads on for our website? And I was like, sure, no problem. They're like, great, here's, just use Dreamweaver. And I was like, cool, what's Dreamweaver? And, people of a certain vintage listening to your show will either get that reference or they'll be furiously Googling or TikToking right now. And so I started just play around with that, and I started just basically comment out code and say, oh, when I get rid of that code, it moves this thing that was in the middle towards the left. Oh, weird, it changes this color. Oh, okay, that's where this image is coming from. I went back to my advisor, and I didn't even have words for design. So I said, hey, I like psychology. I was going to grad school for psychology. I like psychology, I like technology, and I like art. I didn't even have the language. And he connected me with a really brilliant advisor at the University of Oregon. And she totally took me under her wing. And got me into all the HCI work and cared about me and invested in me. And that's a huge part. So to this day, I try to spend a decent amount of time on mentorship, on working with our pipeline, because I really believe that, whatever amount of success I've had has been in no small part about people caring about me and deciding I matter and trying to help me along the way. And so I think it's really important. Especially for the people you talk to on a podcast like this, is that they're sending the elevator back down and keeping that pipeline
100%, going. 100%. That's great that you're doing that. Yeah. Cool. So this, sorry, I didn't want to interrupt your story there, but I think that's
that was, yeah. And then, maybe this is another part of the don't get discouraged. Then I applied to 50 different places, and I got rejected by 49 of them. And then I got on as a contractor at Microsoft, and that's some great people that I still consider mentors to this day, and kind of got full-time positions from there.
Nice. Yeah, it's I remember similar background in terms of like all the mentorship and everything. And when I look, back at that, I just, once you're in, you don't, I don't know if you had this feeling, but I'm like, how did this was impossible. Like, how did I get in? And then you're in, and then you're trying to help other people. So it's don't get discouraged is the message there, I guess. So how did you get into the AI stuff? And, broadly, like what kind of AI stuff are you working on? When you say you're kind of directing the
Yeah.
research team on generative AI, what does that mean?
Yeah, I always think it's interesting because I've been in the AI space for, I guess it's closer to 10 years than it is 9 at this point. And,
Wow.
but I work with people who, got their PhDs in AI and, the 1980s. So in a
Yeah.
lot of ways, I still feel like I'm kind of brand new and I just showed up and I'm kind of trying to contribute something. But I was actually working on the cloud team at Google, and this is when the cloud team there was teeny tiny, and now it's tens of thousands of people or whatever. And this director came over from Microsoft, who joined Google and Google Research, and he kind of gave a talk about how he was starting a team and his vision for personal AI and all these things. His name's Blaise Aguirre-Yarkis. If people have, he's known-ish, and I was really inspired by it. And so I said, "Hey, let me come over." And so I joined his team when it was him and 10 engineers. Just hopped over, and I was like, "Wow, this is really exciting." This is kind of like ImageNet. Just after that, so the
Mm.
deep learning models had just kind of proven their superiority to the previous implementations, and so everyone was like, "Oh my gosh, this is going to work. We're going to be able to put this into products." And so from there, we started to build up a UX team. To my knowledge, I was one of the first UXers in the research division at Google. I know that there were people before me, but like of that era, I think I was one of the very first. Um, and so we started building up the team, and as we were doing that, we were trying to build products, and we started to notice these commonalities, these patterns, right, around like the uncertainty of AI, or the anthropomorphization of AI, or just the way that the false beliefs that people have. And so we started to put those together into a series of principles and kind of durable insights. And myself and Josh Lovejoy started a thing that we called human-centered machine learning. And then later on, we started this group called People Plus AI Research with Fernanda Villegas and Martin Wattenberg. And we kind of built that into a whole kind of lab, I guess you would call it. And from there, I led the UX team. So we kind of, the space has also gone through these metamorphoses over
Mm.
time. And so we used to kind of talk about it as human-centered AI, and then kind of the umbrella term of like responsible AI started to kind of take over. And so then I led the responsible AI UX team there. And then came over and did a similar role here. And so now that brings me to like the day-to-day job. So we just launched a few things. What was it, 2 weeks ago at Connect, our big event, which were a series of AI agents that are powered by the Meta's main LLM, Llama 2. And then an AI assistant called Meta AI, and then some image generation tools, one for stickers and another for doing text to imagery. And so the day to day really looks like stuff that would look very familiar to other people, which is kind of like just basic product work. Like, what is our
Mm.
strategy? Who are our users? What do they want? Are we building something that works for them? Is it usable? All that. But then we also get to much deeper levels, which can be one of the things that's most interesting to me about AI is that we, especially as UX researchers and UXers, have much more of a say in how it's made than just about any other platform
Mm.
before. It's like when cloud rose, we weren't having these discussions about like a responsible cloud or anything like that, or mobile or anything like that. And so then we get into things like how we define success for the underlying base models or the tuned models, what kind of prompt engineering techniques we can develop and replicate, tons around safety and red teaming of models, which have really risen in importance recently. And then all the way to, working on some of the marketing and messaging work there too.
Interesting. Yeah, it's so interesting to hear you talk about this because it's a good reminder that this is actually, I wouldn't say it's old technology, but it's been around for a while, and now it's just had this kind of, with the LLM stuff, this big rise to global fame. And everyone is using the different models and stuff. So
Yeah.
how's that when you're on the inside? How does it feel to be in your field in the last whatever year, 6 months or something?
like in a dishwasher or in the in the washing machine maybe is more like anybody who claims that they're up on everything that's happening is has a bridge in Brooklyn to sell you kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's been fascinating to see. It's been fascinating to see how many people are now Gen AI experts, right? That's how these things go.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, I think before the Gen AI, before the Chat GPT moment or whatever you want to call it is, before that, I mean, to this day, I still think it's incredibly fun stuff to work with. Like, not here by accident, not here sleepwalking. Like, I regularly check in on myself of, okay, is it time to do something else? And I'm still say to myself, no, I think this is the most interesting thing I could do with my time still.
Yeah.
And what was fascinating is, we're like on 11 months now since ChatGPT, the greatest, this is giving Engelbart some run for his money as greatest demo of all time, right? So they put out the ChatGPT as basically a demo of the model,
Right.
to the website to be like, hey, check it out, our model's really good. And they had the greatest accidental consumer product success in history, I think. They skyrocket, and it's always fascinating to me too what pierces into the public conscious, the public conversation, right? So, when the Few Shot Learners paper came out, we were all nerding out on it and going, oh my God, do you understand what this means? And like, and then so we kind of hype cycle ahead of that, right? We're like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then you kind of go, wait. And, you pull back and you say, okay. And, you'll have kind of point of views on both sides. And then, I always try to be and have maintained as this kind of pragmatist in the middle of like, okay, so here's what it can do. Here's what it can't do. Here's what we need to figure out. And at the end of the day, to use a cliche, it still has to solve a problem. Or else, you can kind of push it into as many things as you want, and people will reject it. They'll just be, a big no, thank you, essentially. When you're talking about a lot of like consumer products and products that have choice around them, and so that's been really fascinating. So ever since then, it's just been this kind of rocket ship, and I think that whenever that happens, you have a bunch of incentive misalignment across the board. And so some people are trying to, push an agenda or a message. Some people are trying to go super fast to catch, some kind of reward. And so for UX research, it's really important that we both ride the tiger, but stay focused on what we know matters, which is, okay, are you going to make people's lives better in a way that they can articulate back to you and that you can measure somehow? And then is that good for the business that you're working for?
Yeah. It's super interesting. So just to kind of make sure I understand this, would you say it's fair to say that there's kind of this, you work on, the rise of this technology, and if we talk about LLM now and kind of the, the chat GPT moment, I still don't get those letters right. I think I got it right now, but I'm always like, did I say it right? Did I say it right?
Yeah.
So that presents new challenges to researchers as to kind of, how do we actually research this kind of product that we build on top of these technologies and what it does. But it also introduces these technologies as a tool into our work. So how much of each have you experienced, and does the rise of the tooling space feel distinct from the other stuff, or is it all the same? Or like, tell us a little bit about that experience for, coming from this kind of long 10-year experience in this field.
Yeah, because it's been interesting because so far before the LLMs, there wasn't a huge AI shift that really affected UX research work.
Yeah.
I mean, at the margin, but it didn't upend how we do what we do or anything like that. And I don't know if this one is going to upend how we do what we do. It's going to change it. And so my experience has been far more on the how do we apply this to products, what is the responsible way of using this kind of technology, and far less on the what does this mean for UX research. And it is funny because I get, I need to actually do a lot more here because I get asked this because people are like, oh, you're the Gen AI,
Yeah.
researcher, like you're doing this, right? So I will tell you what I've observed though in the conversation. And what's interesting is one is it's kind of funny to see UX research kind of have the same reaction to a lot of other people, which is like, oh my God, it's going to do my job for me. Like, what
Yeah.
am I going to do now? Where, I look at that and say, like, I mean, if you think that your job is summarizing, quotes from a study, like, I don't think you understand what the job of a UX researcher is.
Yeah.
And I think that that's more of where we need to start. So I think that, there's this really kind of like tactical level that it'll hit, right? Like it will probably help us summarize things faster. Yep. Transcriptions are going to get a lot better. Yep. Searching through structured databases or even unstructured, transcripts for insights we're going to get a leg up there for sure. Um, we're going to figure out how well the models do with that. We're going to figure out where the hallucinations come in. We're going to address that. We're going to march on, and we'll probably be like faster at all of that. I think one of the more exciting things there too is being able to look across broad, structured and unstructured, data. What do I want to call it? Data archives. Data. I think sometimes they're called like data lakes. It's this, I'm talking about tens of thousands of reports or data points or things like that. And being able to really focus in on things like insights versus, what team did this come from or what product was it about, but to look across everything, and even just say it like tiny little interaction patterns, like,
Right.
like everyone at every company at some point has, for a mobile app has been asked, like, should we do long press?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
like, well, there's lots of research on long press across a zillion different things. So maybe we can pull that all together. To me, the most interesting thing though, and then you have these other like little accelerations, right? So the cost of first drafts just went to zero. So writing your report, the template stuff, done. Like it's all good to go. There's this is also highly bounded in the current abilities of the models, especially around languages. So we're just talking about English right now. Outside of that, mostly it's not going to be much help to you. And then the more provocative thing I've seen of the AI is going to take the UX researcher's job is there'll be a proposal or a company or something that's like, oh, you can just ask a model. You don't have to ask users
Yeah. I love that
about a
one.
thing. Yeah, and I'm always, so I'll say like for me, I have the like emotional reaction to that when I hear that, like, which I think anybody does, which is one is I think it's actually really good for us to hear that, to build our empathy with better with people. Like it's good because we kind of a lot of times sit in a spot that feels unAIable. So one is I like that little shock hits us.
Right.
But then two, I kind of said, okay, well, take your emotion out of it. What is it? And I said, well, yeah, if it's a tool. So if what you really think is the best feedback for you is to, query a statistical representation of what an average human on the internet, based on who is on the internet and who has put content on the internet would reply to this question, then you should use that. That makes sense. Now, I'm going to bet that's not actually what you need.
Right.
And then for me personally, I kind of have a thing of I don't trust anybody who doesn't want to talk to their customers.
Right.
Like I don't trust the person.
That's the quote right there. Yeah.
No, it's like, would you do business with somebody who, if I go get my oil changed and the manager doesn't want to talk to me, like what is that? Like they're, and I look at it as one of two things. Either one, their business is going to fail, so why prolong it? And then the other is they have such a structural advantage or something else in the market that nothing will beat it. So the work is irrelevant. I do think though, I'll add kind of one more thing onto this of like the role of Gen AI in the work of UX research is I do think it's, it has to come back to how do we use this to better understand people and have more durable insights about human behavior as it relates to technology and business, rather than how does it speed some tasks up or change the way we do some tasks. And I don't think we're scratching at that. I think we're like actually highly distracted by the like, it's going to speed up some tasks, or I'm not going to be able to do these tasks. And we're not nearly as focused enough on, so how is this helping us understand human nature much more deeply?
Right. And do you mean like totally apart from the conversations we're having, just kind of like having the models figure out something about humans that we don't know, or are you talking about like in conversations, how can we kind of enhance that somehow? Like in, let's say, an
Yeah, I
interview
mean,
or something.
yeah, I think more of the former. So I'm a social psychologist by training,
Yeah.
and I'm like, this is one of the greatest statistical representations of human communication we've ever been able to construct.
Yeah.
And yet we're kind of treating it like, a lot of times as a fairly surface level implementation detail on some things. And I'm like, I think that there will be a whole social science around LLMs.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think it will dominate, but I think like you have tons of social scientists who look very closely at like network theory and like social media platforms. Like, these will be an artifact of that level that they will mine for insights, and not blindly, because I mean, I can already hear, I can't remember, many of my colleagues just hopped up on my shoulder and they're like, Jess, hold on, you got to talk about the bias, you got to talk about all the errors, you got to talk all the problems. And there is all that, but everyone I've talked to that's thought seriously about this idea as well is like very eyes wide open about that, and trying to use it as a tool with those caveats.
Yeah. I could nerd out on this. My background is economic geography, so I grew up like reading all of these like geographers in the 60s that tried to build these like time geography models that they call it, which basically they're basically trying to figure out, we're kind of corporeal beings that need to, like, we live in our little worlds that are like local environments, and then there are networks, and then we have like our desires and stuff, and they just try to model all of that to kind of predict society basically. And it was, back in the 60s they were just like, yeah, we're gonna figure this out. They didn't have the data to do it, but there's a lot of stuff like that that could actually be done now in a sense with this kind of model. So it's an interesting, and that's obviously going to help as a context for the research. So but if I can dig down into the whole kind of, where do we go with the tool and stuff like that. I mean, someone sent me this paper. An investor sent me a paper. Well, you should just build like AI participants, these fake participants basically. And it's like, here's the paper that proves that that's possible. And it's like the paper was basically around like, you could do this like to replace like a survey or something like that. Like this model will perform better than a survey. But that makes me think about something that I want to kind of try out on you, that you know way more about this with me. The whole qual war, or dichotomy, right? It's like, why do we do quantitative stuff like surveys and stuff like that? Well, we do it because we need to be able to analyze the data. It's like we're kind of forcing humans to answer pre-selected buckets, so that then we can make a nice graph on that, instead of just having them speak freely, whatever, right? Which we do in a more deep qualitative way. But it struck me that these LLMs, and I'd love to hear your opinion on this, what they do actually is they kind of solve that problem, because you can look now at extremely rich qualitative data sets. So you have no need to do like a survey now. Like, what do you think about the potential of that stuff? Am I kind of completely misunderstanding something here, or?
No, I think that, I mean, yeah, so qual divide, yeah, a couple of things you hit on in there. I mean, qual divide to me has always been weird. Like I began, my whole undergrad and grad school was all about applying cognitive methods to social phenomenon. So like my undergrad lab was the implicit association test lab, like Tony Greenwald's lab in University of Washington. So it's, basically like, how can we quant these like super qual things?
Yeah.
And so, I don't know, to me, like you're always kind of doing both. With the quant data though, in a lot of ways, there's kind of the, quant and qual, it's like, do you want the tyranny of math or the tyranny of language?
Right.
Because it's going to like force you down a particular path, depending on when you say, I'm going to bundle up these observations, if you will. And so, with the quantification as well, though, it allows you the quantification is nice because it allows you to fulfill the assumptions of most statistical analyses. Again, these are things that I think get lost in a lot of these conversations. I love the one paper thing where I'm like, people are like, a paper says blank. I'm like, do you know how science works? Do you think we do anything based on a single paper? Like, especially in certain fields. Now, sometimes, in some physics fields or something, even then you would still want multiple papers to validate something or to build evidence toward it. And so then in the qual realm, I think that's really the interesting thing is that, it'll start to give structure. And by structure, we need some kind of reduction, some kind of simplification, right? Like, oh, this is fun. We're like going there now. This comes back to the limitations of human attention and our ability to take in these different inputs. And that's why we need abstractions. And that's why we need to have these simplified representations of knowledge because, the whole wide world would be too much to take. And so it'll allow us, in theory, it'll allow us to be able to abstract that in ways that are more useful. But, your question is really prompting of like, but we don't exactly understand how it's becoming structured. And that could be problematic because with a relational database or, if we're just running an ANOVA or something like that, like I know how everything's being structured. It's a formula. It's very clear. Right. And so I can interrogate that and I can examine the assumptions and I can decide how much I trust it. This is one of the challenges, although the field is moving rapidly. I haven't read it, but Anthropic put out a paper this week that seems to be a big step forward in terms of the interpretability of models. Like all of this, it's like, we're not even a year into the Chat GPT era.
Yeah, crazy times. So just thank you for that. So follow-up question on that. When the structure, I agree. I mean, this is obviously a big problem. What we're trying to do when we're building tooling in this is to always keep the transparency, right? It's like, where does this come from? Why did it say? Because we're kind of building just quickly two things. Like one is just like headlines, so you can just get an overview of things. So it takes the transcripts and it's just like, here they're talking about this, here they're talking about this and stuff like that. And because it's timestamped, you can just always go and see, well, give me a highlight reel of that. Yeah, okay, well, actually, it's correct. You can see that the human said this thing. And the other thing is basically just like whenever a researcher presses a button, instead of having to take a note, the LLM just kind of makes a proposal for a note, right? And that's also this kind of transparency, so you can check it. But of course, when you start looking, the whole point of trying to, the power of this is to be able to look at a lot of things that you would never be able to look at otherwise, right? But then we don't know how they're doing it. So in that case, I totally buy what you're saying about the quantitative advantage there. But one could say, and I'd love to hear your view on this, like when we're forcing people to rank things on a 1 to 5, we don't really know how that's being structured either. Like, how did this thing become a 5? How did this thing become a 4? How did this thing become a 3? So I wonder if there's some way here to, perhaps actually we could improve quant models too by studying that phenomena with this kind of stuff. So I don't know, perhaps I'm just going on a big rant now, but this is extremely fascinating to me as an ex-social scientist,
Yeah, I mean, I think that what you're hitting on in a ton of ways is how do you know that the measures are valid, right? These are the validity questions. And so for what we do, I think it's interesting because this comes up a lot, and to me, this depends a ton on what your goal is. So if you are an academic whose goal is to try to clearly describe and show control and manipulation of variables that exist in the natural world, I think it matters deeply about what your 3 on the Likert scale is versus not. If you are trying to make business decisions in a fast-moving environment where you are simply trying to get signal of where to move next, you don't need it. Like, right. I know that I'll get some angry messages from some people, but like, I'm not saying it's not good and we shouldn't try, but most of the time you don't need it. What you need is signal in the right direction. And to be clear, what I'm saying is running like a full measurement validity evaluation on whatever your measurement instrument is. It's like no, we it's a little bit of like, come on, people, we throw together Likert scales or whatever all the
Yeah.
time, and the best people, I think, use the ones that have been validated in other ways. But a lot of times people just throw it together, and because that's kind of what you need in some parts of our job. Other parts of our job, you need strong validity and very, very strong rigor. And other times you need light signal.
Yeah.
Kind of tie it back. I think that's what the top researchers do, is they're able to flow between those with ease, and they know when to do each one.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I mean, we still have this problem today when you do like 5 interviews or whatever. You can learn a lot from just looking at like whatever 5 moderated usability tests. You can learn a lot, even if it's not like statistically whatever significant. So it's not that new
Yeah.
in that sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes that's what I'll tell people. I'm like, as a UX researcher, my superpower is I'll talk to a stranger for an hour and a half without being the one in power.
Yeah.
And very few people are willing to do that. And you do that, if you're the only person who's done that on the whole team, you have a deep insight that nobody else actually has. Um, yeah,
Interesting.
this is what we used to, a little bit of a tangent, but hopefully helpful. Of we used to talk to especially junior researchers, and they'll go to a meeting and somebody will challenge their research, and they'll kind of like back down, or they don't want to speak beyond the data. And we used to
Right.
talk to them and say you're the only, a lot of times it's like, you're the only human on earth who has talked to 50 users of this product. Literally, not the PM, not the direct, not the eng lead, like nobody else. You're the only human on the whole planet who has talked to this many people who use our product. So your point of view, even if you don't have data, is deeply valuable. Your
Right.
instincts are deeply valuable. Like if I took away the title and I said, it's not a UX researcher, it's a whatever, and they've talked to 100 people who have used our product. Do you want to hear what their take is on this thing? Like, nobody in management would say no. Nobody would be
Yeah.
like, no, we're good. No, they should stick to data. I don't want to hear that. Like, it's ridiculous. So,
Yeah, and I mean that's the classic in like management consulting. I think the classic one of the McKinsey founders or something like that has this famous reputation of like having pumped gas for like a week or something to understand like a gas station. And it's like that's what management will go do when they need to kind of they
right.
just So I think that's a very good point actually in all of this, that kind of a good to remember. It's easy to get lost in all this excitement about the LLMs and the AI and all this stuff that is kind of very abstract, right? It's very like it's going to do something.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to look at all of this huge data. It's going to come up with something, and it's like it's actually a great reminder of something that is already true today, which is that just like having people talking to real humans about real problems in real context is actually super powerful. So it's like what you said about the what do we call it, the emotional reaction of hearing that like this technology is going to uh, replace UX researchers, is kind of making us realize that well actually there's actually some stuff that we do here that is very valuable and unique, and it's still the case today even if we're not using these technologies. I think this is kind of an old problem. So
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
it's a gift. It's honestly a gift because it makes us examine what is it that we do, like what
Right.
is it that we're doing here. And I also believe that it's this. So I think UX research, in design to some degree, but I think UX research has it the worst. I believe that we have this collective Jungian trauma of not being at the table.
Yeah.
And so we take anything that could be like status taking from us. It's like, oh my gosh, we fought so hard to get here, and
Yeah.
all this kind of stuff. And so, yeah, it's a funny thing too. I feel like in a lot of ways, like, yeah, UX researchers, they don't know how to not be the underdogs in a lot of ways. And so I would challenge people to say, no, you have a seat at the table. Maybe you do, maybe you don't, uh, but like, if you have a seat at the table and you know the value that you bring, which is not your ability to like, transcript things quickly,
Yeah.
and now you have a brand new, hopefully powerful tool that will help you do those important things. That's a good thing. Like that's power and influence. Those are positives. Those are things that you know the field has been looking for a long time.
That was the perfect ending to the first episode of this season. Wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
I totally agree. I have nothing to add. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me. This was really fun.
Yeah, I would have loved to continue this. Listeners of this podcast know that this is how every episode ends. It's just like I could have gone on here for hours, but we got to respect people's time, and these are endless discussions. So thanks so much for coming on the show. Is there any place where people can kind of reach out or read your thoughts or stuff like that you want to kind of plug?
Yeah, I mean, you can find me on LinkedIn. Jess Holbrook. My Twitter or X or whatever we call it these days is JESSSCON. It's the same on Threads. Yeah, I'm on Threads. I'm using Threads. Check it out. I actually really like it. I'm not just saying that. I actually really like it. Yeah, I don't know. You can search. Everyone can search. They can find
Perfect. Ask the LLM.
Easy.
Ask the LLM.
Yeah, Go ask. Actually, that'd be really interesting. We should go ask ChatGPT, Bard, Meta AI, maybe Claude, a few others, see what they say.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you so much.